congressman for Minnesota's 1st District for 12 years, and now sharing his thoughts with us on the Al Travis Show. It's Congressman Gil Gutknecht.
So lucky to have him. Congressman Gil Gutknecht. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well.
Fantastic. We get to have you on every couple of weeks. Love doing it. Let me ask you this. Your thoughts on the tariff situation. It's been about a month now. Is Trump winning this or losing this? I'm in the impression Canada's coming down, having some conversations with him. I presume they want a deal. You want to talk to the president. There's only one reason right now, right?
Well, there are probably a lot of reasons that, generally speaking, as soon as a new Canadian prime minister is elected, that's one of the first meetings they want to have because, whether we like it or not, and I think most Americans do like it, and most Americans like Canadians, most Canadians like Americans. We have a long-standing relationship, which is very positive. And so the problem is the Canadian left has learned from the American left. And that is that they have no real solutions to some of the major problems. And Canada has a lot of economic problems. Their economic problems are much, much more severe than ours. I mean, they literally have a declining standard of living by their own measure. And they know that they're not spending enough on their national defense. They are far too dependent on the Americans.
U.S.
And all of a sudden, along comes a guy by the name of Trump and says, by the way, we used to have this thing called the North American Free Trade Agreement. And there used to be free trade between the United States and Canada. And gradually, we have allowed the Canadians to kind of fudge on that free trade idea.
Yeah.
And they've put tariffs on a number of key products. At the same time, the United States hasn't reciprocated. So we're in a situation where we've allowed the trade thing to become imbalanced. At the same time, socialism has eaten away at the core of the Canadian economy. And the left's answer and their solution to this is to blame people like Donald Trump. Blaming Donald Trump is not a solution to Canada's problems. Okay. Yep. At the end of the day, they have got to face, what their real problems are. And the real problems are that they've become far too socialistic on a whole lot of things. And now they can't really pay the bills. And when Trump says, oh, by the way, we're going to place reciprocal tariffs on things like, steel and copper and some of the base industries, including automobiles and auto supplies. All of a sudden, that pulls the rug right out from whatever the Canadians thought they could get away with. So I think it's going to be a very important meeting at the White House today. I don't want to divulge any secrets or anything, but I had an interesting conversation yesterday with our friend Pete Hoekstra, who was just installed as the new ambassador to Canada. And I will say this, he said, it's going to be a very interesting meeting and no one knows exactly how it's going to go. It could be a very short meeting or it could be a cordial meeting and they could actually make some progress. So we will have to wait and see exactly what's going to happen. But I do hope that someone in the room, and it may have to be J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance may be the best one to present this statement, if you will, to the new Canadian ambassador, to the new Canadian prime minister. Somebody needs to say to him, blaming Donald Trump for your problems is not a solution for your problems. And that's been basically how that campaign was run by Mr. Carney. And so we'll have to wait and see how the meeting goes. But at the end of the day, the Canadians need the United States much more than we need them. And so Trump has a very strong bargaining position. And all he really would like to see is return to the basic notion of what we had before with the North American Free Trade Agreement.
Let me ask you this, sir. You've been in here a long time. You've been following along. Most of us never even thought about tariffs in particular. I mean, it just wasn't something we dealt with on a daily. Then this comes out that Trump wants a fair, tariffs. Sounds like a good thing to me. How is it that he gets beat up so bad on this from the left that he's causing inflation? He's doing this. When you look at it, 172 other countries have tariffs on us. They must believe him. Are they all making mistakes and now we're just joining the mistake pool? You know what I'm saying? How is it this tariff imbalance doesn't make sense? The average duck like me, if they're going to put 25% on us, put 25% on them. Let's play the game. Maybe I'm not smart enough for this. How is it 172 have it on us, and we're the bad guys for jumping in the pool?
Well, once again, I mean, the left, whether it's in the United States or in Canada, believes that the only solution to any of our problems is to blame Trump. I mean,
No.
it's ridiculous. When people analyze it just for 10 seconds, they say, well, how is it that, our tariffs on things coming in from China are averaged like 10%, and their tariffs on American products going into China average over 50%. Okay.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to have some kind of parity. Now, it may not be exactly the same. We may not have completely free trade with China or with Canada, but we have to reach some kind of an equilibrium, which is fair to both sides. And ultimately, Trump is a fabulous negotiator, and he understands this probably better than almost any of us do.
Yeah.
And that is at the end of a negotiation, both sides have to leave the negotiating table feeling like they got the best deal that they could. Okay.
Yep.
You can't have a deal that's completely one-sided, because at the end, what it really does is it creates animus down the road. And so it has to, I hate to use the term win-win, but every negotiation really has to result in some kind of a win-win.
Okay. I want to go to break early because I really want to talk about the budget and what's is or is not happening currently with the budget. Maybe I'm missing something. I was under the impression the Republicans had the Senate and the House and the presidency, and they're looking currently that quite possibly having the big, beautiful bill, we might just get to it by July 4th. Maybe I'm missing something. You can help me out. We've got Congressman Gil Gutknecht on the Al Travis Show.
Easily offended? The Al Travis Show is not for you. The Al Travis Show. All sides are welcome.
And we love having Gil Gutknecht on the program with us because the congressman knows exactly what's going on, and he can take this negativity off my heart. I read somewhere that in the same time period that Biden had the three legs of the stool, he had 11 pieces of legislation that he's already signed. President Trump has the Senate and the House, and they're going to hope, this is their hope now, by the 250th anniversary of this fine country, we'll get that big, beautiful bill in July 4th. Sir, why does it take this long? A couple of deals. They said if we get the tax cuts, that will help offset whatever happens with the tariffs. That'd be a good thing, help the market out, that sort of thing. Why in the world does it take us this long to get our poop in a scoop, if you pardon the expression, to get this done? And I would throw this out that, and I lost it. It went away. You tell me why this takes so long, sir. Why can we not get a tax bill done?
Well, first of all, let me go back to your premise. Mm-hmm. Your premise was that Republicans control the House and the Senate.
By numbers.
Yeah. No. But in reality, they have more cats than the other guys. Okay.
But the other side wrangles their cats better. If you're going to go cat wrangling, the other side never has a problem wrangling their cats.
Well, that's true. That's true. And I think it's part of, I don't know whether, there are different breeds of cat. Okay.
Okay.
But Republican cats are not that easy to get all in the same bunch.
They're like barn cats. Okay.
Right. They sort of go wherever they feel like they want to go. Okay. And that's not a bad thing. Okay. I think that in many respects is a healthy thing for democracy. That the healthy side of it is there are Republicans, and I would probably have been in this group, who say, getting the tax cuts, and let me make it really clear. There will be very few tax cuts in this bill, okay? Maybe, and I think it probably will be, that tips will be taken off. They will be in the bill, okay? There'll be no more tax on tips. Taxes on Social Security might be a different question, okay? But those are the two principal cuts that are in the bill. Almost everything else that's going to be in the bill as it relates to taxes is just going to be extending the current tax rates. All right. So I think there's a misnomer by both sides that this is a big tax cut. Yep. All it does is extend the tax situation as it is today with a couple of adjustments. All right. That's number one. But number two, I used to say that somebody ought to write on a big white board, it's spending, stupid. Okay. The reason we have inflation is not that the federal government didn't raise enough taxes. The reason we have a deficit and a huge national debt is we have overspent. Okay. I'm interested in the big, beautiful package, but I am more interested in the Congress and the president demonstrating their seriousness about reducing spending. It is spending at the end of the day that is driving inflation. When you spend money that you don't have, when the Federal Reserve prints money that it doesn't have, it means that money is worth less. And so when you talk about the various cats in the group, there's a significant group of cats who say, well, yeah, we're in favor of extending the tax brackets as they currently exist. And frankly, we'd probably be in favor of taking tips off the table. We're not so sure about Social Security because those tax cuts, if you say that Social Security is no longer taxable, what you're really talking about is only people who have incomes of probably above $80,000, because the people below that, Social Security, they're not paying much tax anyway. All right. Yep. So you can call that a tax cut for the rich. And I mean, some people will say that, but in truth, it will affect more people that have higher incomes. All right. Yep. So the bottom line is, if they're not willing to really control spending, I would be one who'd say, let's sit on this until we pass the appropriation bills, because that's where we're really going to have to cut. And that's what Congress hates to do. In terms of PBS, let me just give you one example. The president has proposed reducing or eliminating the expenditure for the national broadcast system. Do you think that's going to pass?
No.
Okay.
It should, but it won't.
All right. So you start adding all of these things together, including a lot that's been discovered by Doge. Getting some of those things passed will not be easy.
See, but this
tax cut is easy.
This is what I wanted to say. This is the shell game that I'm getting. That's why I'm kind of getting teed off. What do you mean July 4th to tell me what we need to do? If you know you got to do it, do it. The one with the Doge. So I don't know how many, $600 billion that he's found so far in waste and gut. Does anybody else realize none of that has been cut?
Right.
Now he went USAD. You can't spend it. That money must be sitting in a pot somewhere. But they did a continuing resolution, the exact same amount of USAID did last year. They've got it this year. None of that has been cut because we did a continuing resolution. When do we say, okay, Doge, here's the Doge findings. Congress vote on it. Get rid of the crap. They haven't done any of that's what's teeing me off. Now we're going to get halfway through this year, July 4th, halfway through the year, and we have yet to man up and say, even the crap. The Sesame Street setup in whatever country that was. We're still paying for that. At least the money's there. Now, will it be sitting in a pile if the president said don't spend it? Is it just going to sit there and they can suck it back in after this next bill? I don't know how that works. Can we get that Doge money back?
The temptation will be among some of the groups, and frankly, a lot of the lobbyists in Washington, is, oh my gosh, there are these pots of money that Doge has essentially secured that still exist. The money has been approved and appropriated. You know what? That we could go a long way. We could do this. We could do that. So all of a sudden, there may be things in some of the final appropriation bills to take that money that Doge was trying to save and spend it on other things. And so, as a fiscal conservative who really does believe it is a moral responsibility to balance the federal budget, I would be hesitant to pass the big, beautiful bill until the appropriation guys and the spenders, and frankly, a lot of the lobbyists in Washington, including a lot of the folks in the Pentagon and in other agencies and so forth, who are going to just squeal like stuck pigs that, oh my gosh, well, you can't cut that. You know, we absolutely have to have 10 times more flag officers than we had at the peak of World War II. I mean, all of these things ought to be on the table. And right now, it strikes me that the only thing that's really on the table is extending the tax cuts and including, you know, tipped employees and Social Security recipients. And to me, that is not a budget. That is simply, you know, giving everybody more candy.
I might be wrong, but I think it's been 88 since the last time we actually did the appropriations bills as 12 different bills, right? We haven't done those in years.
Oh, no. We did those when I was in Congress.
When not that long.
So came in, and then that was in the 90s. And starting in 95, I think almost every year we passed all of the appropriation bills.
I'm going to look it up, but then it's been after Newt was out. We've gone 2 decades.
15 years. It may well have been 15 years, and you know we know for the last decade it's almost always been a continuing resolution, and that's no way to run a government.
So, do you think then this Congress, again, we have the House and the Senate, can they get appropriations bills out before July 4th?
I think what a lot of Republicans are saying, no yeah, no pro yeah. You know, trust but verify. Show me. Okay. Show me the money. Show me the spending bills, and then we'll talk about the tax bill. Because you know, to a certain degree, the tax bill is inflationary too. Okay, you know, and so at some point you have to bring spending and taxes into line. And if you do the tax bill, if you give kids dessert first, they're not going to eat their vegetables.
Yeah, and you are completely correct. There's no reason that any generation should spend $2 trillion more on itself than it can afford and put it on our grandkids. It's just terrible that we're doing it this way. One last thing quick for you. When does the Supreme Court get involved? Another federal court judge here in Minnesota said that the federal government couldn't kick this guy out who was here on his visa, going to school in Minneapolis, but got a DUI, is driving intoxicated, so that we want to kick him out of the country. And the judge says, that's really not doing massive harm to the country, so it really probably isn't that bad a deal and want him to stay in the country. When does the Supreme Court get involved and decide whether the local federal judges can be in charge of policy or if it's the president? When do we find out how this works? Because there are judges all over the country telling Trump what he can and cannot do for federal policy.
Well, I think already the Supreme Court has sort of barked, okay? They've essentially sent a message to the federal district courts, you know, explaining that there is a delineation between and a separation of powers. I think they're going to have to bark louder. And the reason that I think ultimately, you know, it goes back to this whole idea of Winston Churchill, that Americans always do the right thing once we've exhausted every other possibility. I think the Supreme Court will ultimately have to do the right thing and issue a very powerful statement that, you know, we're not going to we're just going to we're not even going to hear these if they're brought to us. We're just going to immediately strike them down because it violates separation of powers. And when the federal courts understand that, but it also brings one other issue, and I think we have to talk about this. Justice Roberts likes to say, well, there are no Republican judges and there are no Democrat judges. He knows that's not true, okay? and so, what we need to have, and particularly while the Republicans control the Senate, is we need to get more federal judges on the bench who understand separation of powers, who understand the fact that the president has enormous administrative powers, and the federal courts are limited dramatically in what they can get involved with. And I think most of the Republican judges understand that. Not all,
Yeah.
but there are Republican judges, there are Democrat judges, there are liberal judges, there are conservative judges. We need more judges who understand the Constitution and understand the roles that they play.
Appreciate it. My friend, I'm completely out of time. Congressman Gil Gutknecht, thanks for coming on the show, my friend.
I'll try to keep them in the green.
Please hit them straight, buddy.